Bill Gates would sleep under the desk, get right back up, get right back to work. Jeff Bezos started in the garage with nothing, same thing. Warren Buffett, because at one point he was reading 40 hours a week, reading, not even working 40 hours a week. It didn't matter how many books he read. It wasn't like, yo, I read a book a week. No, I read 40 hours a week. If that's 10 books, 20 books, 35 books, 40 hours a week reading, commitment.
Kind of seems like everything starts with knowing yourself first, but then that conflicts with the idea of just start.
Everything starts with the importance of, with understanding the importance of knowing yourself. But you get to know yourself through your experiences. That's why you should just start. Those are not circumstances that the 6-year-old boy would have created for himself. He would have created a different set of circumstances. He would have created circumstances from the perspective of abundance. Circumstances that were rooted in love and love only. So it's a matter of taking these experiences that I've accumulated throughout the course of my life and not allowing them to taint the vision that I had for my life at the beginning of my life.
That's something that that I hear you say a lot, but I never really understood what it meant. And so It's the concept of progressing in life, improving yourself, but at the same time going back to who you were when you were 7. To me, those sound like very big contradictions.
This is something that I say a lot that you never understood.
Right.
Okay. I thought you said this is something that you say a lot that you didn't understand. That's why I laughed. Okay. Gotcha.
How does that work? And what does that even mean?
Okay. For example, this year I turned 35. And I said I want to be the 35-year-old version of my 6-year-old self. Essentially what that means is that boy, that 6-year-old boy, he knew the answer. He knew the answer before the world got to the teenager and convinced the teenager that he was wrong, or that he had to take the long route, or that he wasn't qualified yet to go for the thing that he wanted in his life. And so he created a lot of roadblocks for himself. He created a lot of barriers to entry in his mind and used much of his early adulthood to break through those boundaries, to find ways around those barriers, to validate his position in life. Just to end up somewhere that he didn't want to be originally. But having to go throughout that experience to see that this was a place that he didn't want to be. Getting to the age of 25 and realizing he was going to have a long life. Because up until that point, everything was in survival mode. Everything was just a matter of getting this goal accomplished, graduating college, to show my family that they can be something other than a rapper, a singer, actor, or basketball player. But still having this inkling that a lot of people don't make it past 25 where I'm from. So making it to the age of 25 and feeling like you beat the odds was the first real opportunity to foresee a long life. And having to shed yourself of all of those stories that you told yourself. Having to shed yourself now of all of the false identities or partial false identities that you've adopted over the years to shield yourself or protect yourself from really these circumstances that to a large extent I created because of my thought process, because of my belief system. Those are not circumstances that the 6-year-old boy would have created for himself. He would have created a different set of circumstances. He'd have created circumstances from the perspective of abundance. Circumstances that were rooted in love and love only. So it's a matter of taking these experiences that I've accumulated throughout the course of my life and not allowing them to taint the vision that I had for my life at the beginning of my life. And using the experiences to serve me as opposed to distract me from who I really am. How do I make the environment a product of me instead of me being a product of my environment? And I mean that internally. Because you adopt the principles of your environment internally. Right? Your external environment influences how you see the world and how you feel about yourself internally. How did I feel about myself when it wasn't about the environment? When I was still clear and I was still untainted by the experiences that just come along with growing up. When I still had a childlike imagination that kept me, or rather protected me, from thoughts of mediocrity. That protected me from thinking maybe I should take the safe route. Maybe I should be like what I see in the environment because that's what makes sense. That's what I see as possible. From people who, or for people who look like me and come from where I come from. But the 6-year-old version of myself didn't have those didn't have such a narrow perspective, rooted in what everybody else was doing. There was a narrow perspective rooted in what I wanted to do and how I wanted to live and what my goals are. And as you age, life can kind of steer you away from that. You can start drifting away from what your original purpose is. And the goal is to not drift. So in one sentence, it's be very intentional about what you're doing in your life. Be very intentional about the goals that you have. And don't allow limiting beliefs to justify you not chasing that goal or not pursuing that goal in a fashion that brings about the least amount of resistance. Because as a child, you just think, I want that, you're going to go straight for that. As an adult, you become more strategic. Right? Because you feel like you have to be. So how do you end up being someone who's strategic, someone who's mature enough to understand the necessity for strategy, but also mature enough to understand that some childlike qualities are what add substance and value to your life. And that childlike quality is your imagination of what you could be, despite what the current circumstances are. So that's what I mean when I say I want to be the 35-year-old version of my 6-year-old self.
You think people can even still remember what they were like when they were 6, or what their vision was 20, 30 years later?
I think some can. And it's like readily available to them. It doesn't require a lot of work. And I think for others it does. They've adopted a new persona that's so strong and have brought about maybe some reward that they enjoy so deeply that they've forgotten who they were at 6 years old. But there's a child within all of us. There's a child within all of us that's trying to protect us, trying to guide us through our lives. Oftentimes, the child is so interested in protecting us and helping to guide us from the pain that it felt that it neglects itself. But the child is accustomed to being abandoned. And because the child is accustomed to being abandoned and knows what it feels like to be abandoned, it tries to protect the adult from the feeling of abandonment and the consequence of it. And the adult is familiar with that child because the adult used to be that child. And because the adult doesn't want to be that child anymore, it doesn't want to experience the pain that the child felt any longer, they allow the child to dictate their actions without ever really acknowledging the child, only acknowledging the child's pain. But from a distance, acknowledging the child's pain as an adult, not going deeper within self to acknowledge the way that they felt as a child and feel it as an adult, and communicate with that child within them as an adult and say, I got it from here. Apologize to the child within for not having seen the child for all these years, just using the child for what they can get from it. And thus giving the child, as an adult, what the child didn't have from other adults when we were children. Because ultimately, whatever we experience as children that we don't want to experience from others, we learn to do to ourselves. If you're a child that experienced abandonment issues from others, you try to protect yourself from feeling abandoned in the future. But because you're so accustomed to feeling abandoned, it becomes a learned practice. So subconsciously, you do it to yourself. For example, you run from other relationships, meaningful relationships that can really be fruitful in your life because you don't want to be hurt by someone just for them to leave you someday, i.e. abandon you. So you don't pursue those relationships. And you not pursuing that relationship, you miss out on a lot of those experiences that could have been really fruitful in your life. And in that way, you abandon yourself. You abandon your own growth because you're afraid of inevitable pain. But now, instead of just getting it from someone else, you get it from yourself and someone else. Because it's going to happen anyway. That person that you thought would leave probably will leave. The interesting part is, maybe they would have stayed if you didn't think they would leave. Because you not thinking they would leave would encourage you to behave differently. To behave in a way that would be enticing to them. To behave in a way that would be interesting to them. To behave in a way where they would actually feel the love that you have for them, which would encourage them to stay, because now you would actually have a relationship of abundance. But because you're afraid of that, because you don't pursue that, because you don't want to feel abandoned, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You cause the abandonment because you abandoned yourself.
Can you ever get rid of your fear of abandonment?
I definitely think you can get rid of your fear of abandonment. First, you have to acknowledge that you have it. Two, acknowledge that it's an illusion. Fear itself is an illusion. Three, acknowledge or define what does abandonment really mean. Does it mean that someone left you? Because everyone is going to leave you. No one gets to stay here. So eventually everyone goes. Does it mean that someone betrayed you? Did they have the intention to betray you? Were they ever really betraying you, or were they just trying to live the best life for themselves? Excuse me. Did they not even see you? Oftentimes, that's what leads to the feeling of abandonment, being unacknowledged, unseen, unheard. Did this person actually have the capacity to see and hear you? But as someone who's afraid of abandonment, do you see and hear yourself? Do you show up for you in a real way? Because part of showing up for you in a real way is to not run from others because you really want to be around others, but you're afraid of abandonment. So the fact that you want to be around others, but you're afraid of abandonment, typically creates toxic relationships. What can happen in those instances is either you choose someone who you know doesn't really have your best interests at heart, doesn't really care to be around you, doesn't really care to see you, but yet you're pursuing that person just so you can validate the fact that, yeah, I knew it. I knew this is why I shouldn't be chasing people, because they do things like this. But you're attracted to that person because they do things like that. And you want to validate that people do things like that. So you choose people who do things like that, but on a subconscious level. Or you attract broken people. People that are looking to be fixed by others. And a person that you feel needs to be fixed is a person that you feel won't leave you. Because they need you. They need you to fix them. But no one can fix anybody. We can only fix ourselves. And so either one of those is a trauma bonding experience. It's a toxic relationship because it's rooted in lack. So, yes, you can get rid of your fear of abandonment. But you have to acknowledge that it's there, and how does it show up in your life, and what you can do to change it. And typically it's to get rid of the fear. One, by noticing that fear is an illusion. It's something you create in your mind based on circumstances. It's a negative reaction to external impulses. And also defining what abandonment means to you in the context of no one being able to stay here forever, and in the context of another person's capacity to create room for you in their lives, and vice versa. Because sometimes people are not very present in other people's lives, making it easy to be forgotten, but then they're angry when they're forgotten. Relationship is like a plant and a butterfly. If you don't water the plant, it dies. If you hold the butterfly too tight, you kill it. If you open your hand too much, it flies away. What is the perfect grip to have on a butterfly to keep it alive, keep it interested without hurting it and without letting it go? How do you keep the plant living? That's the dance of a relationship. Because life gets busy. But what are the aspects of your life that are actually productive? Your relationships are a very productive part of your life. It's not really something you want to dabble in. It's something you might want to focus on. And focus on what things mean to you. What does abandonment mean to you? Because if it's people leaving, you're always going to feel abandoned. If it's people not always having time for you, you're always going to feel abandoned. Because you don't always have time for you. There's plenty of times throughout your day you're not even thinking about yourself. You're thinking about something that someone else did. Something that someone else is doing. Even if it doesn't really affect you. What are you doing? Instead of focusing on how much this person is worth, how much are you worth? Instead of caring about what color socks your favorite celebrity had on Tuesday, what are you doing? Tony Robbins says this a lot. A lot of us major in minor things. It's true. Things that are not really moving a needle in our own lives. What is abandonment to you? Is it real? We established that fear is not real, but is abandonment real? Yes, it's being unacknowledged. What does that mean for you? Different people have different definitions of what that means. Sometimes the definition is based on abandonment. Sometimes a person has a really almost detached definition of what abandonment means. They come across like they don't really care about any of it. You don't have to acknowledge them. They're cool with that. You don't have to see them. You don't have to hear them. It's fine. Sometimes that can be the case. A lot of times, it comes from abandonment, though. You don't expect anybody to really see you or hear you, so it's become a norm for you not to be heard or seen. So it's not really something that you look for, although it may be something that you yearn for. But But because you've abandoned yourself, you've detached from yourself, you don't even feel that yearning so strongly anymore, even though it's very strong. Because it's happening on a subconscious level, and you have detached from that. Or so you think you have. Oftentimes, abandonment comes down to capacity. What capacity do you have to be heard and seen? What capacity do you have for relationships? Meaning, what is your capacity for pursuing a relationship? For seeing someone else, for hearing someone else? And for doing that consistently, continuously. Because life changes. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself moving away from people that you really care about. They'll find themselves moving away from you. You'll find yourself taking that personally, even though it's not. That person got a job offer, moved across the continent. That person just had a child. That person got married. Right? The context of life changes as you age. So if abandonment feels like change, meaning we're 35 years old now, and we've been friends for the past 20 years, but our relationship doesn't feel the same way it felt 20 years ago. Because we're not doing the same things we did 20 years ago. And chances are, there's going to be an issue there. Because the context of life is not the same anymore. At 15, chances are your life is very different from the way it is at 35. The things you did at 15, you're probably not doing at 35. Doesn't mean that the person is abandoning you. It means that life is changing. And we can choose to change with it or not change at all. Either way, we should be clear on what abandonment is. Make sure that we're not abandoning ourselves. And chances are, if we're not abandoning ourselves, we'll feel much less abandoned by others. Because we have more capacity to love them. So we're less concerned about what we're getting back. And the more you give love, the more you get love. And you got a bunch of people around you celebrating you, loving on you, adoring you, admiring you. Chances are you're not going to feel abandoned. But you got to go first. You got to be willing to go first. And if you're willing to go first, perhaps you'll have a fruitful life that feels connected and not lonely or abandoned. And the first step to going first is to give yourself the attention. Give yourself the love. Give yourself the acknowledgement that you're seeking from others. Because you train people on how to treat you. Because you train people on how to think about you. If you're someone that doesn't value you, why would someone else value you? Not saying that they shouldn't, but on a subconscious level, perhaps the thought process is, this is not a person that's valuable. This is not a person to be valued. because the indications of a person who values themselves are absent here. So why should we value this person? How you interact with others helps shape their thought process of you. How you present yourself is important. Again, we talk a lot about expression, and wanting to express yourself non-verbally, but what are you saying? And is it of value? Is it something that anyone should care about? So perhaps we can start with acknowledging ourselves, not abandoning ourselves, getting back to the 6-year-old version of who we used to be. Getting back to the 6-year-old version of ourselves. Before the world taught us how to abandon that child. How to practice this learned behavior. Which reverberates through the universe. And so we get where we are. Yes. I think we can do away with the fear of abandonment.
There's a lot of people, when you ask them what their why is, they want to feel of significance.
Yeah. This generation.
I don't think so. Was that even mean this generation? Does that mean millennials? Gen Z?
That means both. Millennials and Gen Z. This generation is like my generation, millennials. And then also your generation, Gen Z. Or the generation, Gen Z. Yeah.
Does that also come from abandonment?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it comes from significance, from not being abandoned. Having a childhood where everybody and everything was catering to you. So now you feel like that's normal. Now you feel like the world should cater to you. So you constantly seek that significance because that's just what you're accustomed to. Sometimes it's seeking love and feeling as if I'm not significant, then people won't love me. Because people seem to only love the people who are significant, who add value. Right? Even if it's just add value to imagination.
You said earlier, like, is what you say of any value?
Indeed.
Value to who? And does it really matter if it's to value, if it's to the people that you care for and that care for you?
Well, essentially, why would those people care for you? If you bring no value to the table, why would they care for you?
But then it seems like it's all very conditional, right?
Excuse me. Subconsciously it is.
Well, that's what matters though, right?
What?
Because it doesn't make it less true.
I think I'm not sure what your question is. When you say that's what matters, what do you mean?
It also matters.
What also matters?
Whether it's conscious or subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Love being conditional is not unconditional love.
Of course, love being conditional is not unconditional love.
So if you are only love if you bring value, or listen to or heard when you bring value to the people that you care about and care for you.
Well, why would they care for you?
Isn't that unconditional love?
For someone to care for someone for no reason? There's a reason why a person cares for you.
But you said if what you say doesn't hold value, as if that is the only reason.
No, I didn't. I gave an example using what you said. Speaking in reference to or in context of expression. One of the ways in which we express ourselves is verbally. You train people on how to think about you. And based on how they think about you, they develop a belief on how they should treat you. So one of the ways in which you train a person on how to think about you is through what you say to that person. If you say something to someone that makes that person believe that you're extremely intelligent, they're going to treat you differently than they would treat a person who says something that makes them think they're not very intelligent at all. Because we live in a society that adopted a belief system that supports a person who is deemed to be extremely intelligent being of more value than a person who is deemed not to be. So that's one of the ways that you can help condition how someone else thinks of you.
I can understand that. To me, where it comes down to is it sounds very strategic to move like that. And that again moves away from being who you were when you were 6, which is a lot more free flowing.
It does.
So that's to me where it's kind of like there's a conflict in that. It's a contradiction.
But the goal is to be the age you are now. For example, be the 35-year-old version of the 6-year-old self. You're not the 6-year-old version of the 6-year-old self. So you don't lose all of the wisdom you've acquired over the 30 or 29 plus years. You take that wisdom with you, but you keep the childlike imagination. You keep the childlike curiosity. You keep the childlike clarity. You keep the childlike certainty, definiteness, commitment. You keep that. But now you have the wisdom of strategy that can propel you toward the goal with less friction.
How do you go about then when you're trying to give love to yourself? Not into the trap of developing yourself in order to feel like you're working for validation.
One more time.
A lot of people then, when they get abandoned, they invest in themselves, in their physiques, in their finances,
Yes.
to feel like they're somebody.
Indeed.
Because, again, without these things, they don't feel like nobody else besides themselves values them. But those do not tend to be ever people that are happy.
Maybe not in that moment. I wouldn't say they're not ever happy. Maybe while they're doing that, they're not happy. Yes.
I mean, there'll be moments that they're gonna be happy, obviously. But all in all,
Now, I think you're saying for as long as they're trying to gauge their value on how they look and how much money they make, they're not going to be happy. I agree. But they can come to a point where they no longer do that. And that's when they can begin to truly seek happiness in a real way. It's the only thing that's sustainable in this life is who you are. What you do is not sustainable. What you have is not sustainable.
but that who you are is such a vague concept, because some people say you are what you do on a consistent basis.
I know.
Some people say you are your principles,
Yeah.
but these change every 5 years.
Yeah. You're not what you do. That's how you present yourself. There's levels to R in society. But in reality, there isn't. There really isn't. There's who you are and how you show up in the world. How you show up in the world is what people mean when they say who you are. Right? It's your identity, it's your personality. It's your personal reality. It's what experience is attached to you in physical. But a lot of that is a lie. A lot of people are pretending. And the ones who aren't, they're trying to be themselves. They're trying to personify their values or their morals within the confinement of societal norms, societal beliefs, which can feel like a cage to some people. The objective is to figure out who you are and live your life through that in a way that's purest, most consistent with that. Oftentimes we change to stay the same. We find new ways to justify this new phase that we're in that emphasizes who we really are more accurately as we go through our life. You start with no beliefs. You adopt a belief as you go throughout life, or multiple beliefs. Life disproves most of those beliefs until it comes to a point where you're like neutral again, almost. Almost, not exactly. Right? But if you adopt the laws of nature, you become more neutral than not. And by the time you get to that space, you're old. Just a circle. You start out as someone who needs people to do things for you. You have no beliefs. You're neutral. You go throughout life, you adopt some beliefs, you lose them. You adopt new ones, you lose them. Eventually, you become neutral. Back to this point where you probably need people to help you live throughout the remainder of your life. What's left of it, and you're neutral. Everything else is just a journey to get back to that space. Only difference is your subconscious is developed. When you're a child, it's not developed. When you're an elder person, it is developed. But supposedly, if you've lived a meaningful life and you got to a point where you understand, you get life, you know it, you're back to the space of neutrality. with a fully developed subconscious. And now you have the experience to justify your neutrality. When in the beginning you were neutral because you almost didn't have a choice. You didn't have any experience. And so in that way we change to stay the same. You were who you were before you got here. That's what Jay said. It's a fact. You could come in and do all the things and act a certain way, like he said. That's just the top layer. You were who you were before you got here. There are certain children that behave a certain way without programming. Right? They're independent. Right? They had no abandonment issues, none of that. They came out, they want to do things on their own. They don't want you trying to hold them up so they can walk. They don't want any of that. They want to do it. And then you got some children that are extremely dependent. They need you to help them do everything, or so they act like they do. You got some kids, they're 9, 10 years old. Bye, mom. Running out the door. Bye, dad. They're playing. They come home. They don't need you to be overly too connected with them. You got some kids that are like that. They want you to rub them down. They're teenagers. Mom, come read me a story. It's different. Dad, come read me a story. You got pubic hairs. And you want someone to read you a story. Pubic hair, the reason why I'm saying that is a symbol of growing up, is a symbol of transition. Those two don't really match. It's like going to a bar mitzvah. You're a man now. You don't get the same treatment you got when before 13. Right? That's nature's bar mitzvah. So you have those parents that oblige that. You have those children that require that. Without training. That's just that child's nature. They were who they were before they got here. They were already that. They didn't need anything to train them and make them that. They were already that. Now you can change as you age. It's not you though. That doesn't mean that phases aren't real. Sometimes a child has a phase. Sometimes a person has a phase. It's also true. But what sustains itself? Are you connected to yourself enough to know what's real and what's a phase? Which is also part of the journey.
In that sentiment then, if you already are who you are, why do self-improvement if that can only take you further away from who you truly are?
That's not the objective of self-improvement or self-development. I think that's really what you mean, self-development. Self is the first word. It's to develop yourself, who you really are. It's not to pull you away from who you are. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called self-development. It's the development of self. Self is you, who you really are. It's not who you really are. It's not self. It's it. It's this thing that you created, this character. It's not really you. Self-development is developing yourself, who you really are. So it doesn't pull you further away from yourself, it pulls you closer to yourself. It helps you understand yourself more. For people who are seeking true self-development, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing, excuse me. And it's not there to help you be someone else. That's not the intention. The intention is for you to really be who you are. But without guidance, it's very easy to overlook that. And think that this is to, these self-help books are there to make you someone that you aren't. And that's really not the goal. Because anything that's not you is not sustainable. You can learn the art of seduction. You'll use it for a while, maybe. Hopefully, at some point, if it's not really who you are, you'll stop. "48 laws of power," same thing. It's good to know those things, but you may not behave in a way that gives you the power, whatever power is, really, right? You may not behave in those ways that give you this supposed power. But you know them. There's value in knowing them. But you don't behave like that because it's not you. You may employ 10 of them consciously, really focus on them. And those are the ones that resonate with you. The other ones, you know about them. You can see it when other people are doing it, but it's not you. Or you can use all 48. In a way that actually supports you. Just because you use all 48 doesn't make you king, doesn't make you queen. You can use all 48 and be the general. You can use all 48 and be the king's hand. Because the implication of the book was everyone is using them subconsciously. They either use them well or they don't use them, or they use them poorly. But everyone is on the spectrum of these 48 in some shape, form, or fashion. Everybody participates in this, whether they know it or not. Because there's a hierarchy in life.
And then along the way, you just find out.
That's it. Along the way, you get to know who you are.
Sometimes you have people tell you, friends and family, like, this is not who you are when you do something. Should you listen to that? Because nobody knows you better than you know yourself.
But you may not hear yourself anymore. So you may need an external reminder. So should you listen to it? Yeah. Should you obey it? Well, I think you should listen to it with a grain of salt. So you don't necessarily obey it, but you keep an eye out for it. Maybe this person is right. Maybe you're not being yourself. Sometimes it takes a long time to understand that. So, try not to rob yourself of the experience of finding out if you're being yourself. But also be mindful of the potential consequences of your decisions. Sometimes you can have an experience or pursue an experience that will give you a similar understanding of self. But in a more palatable way. You can go to college or you can go to prison. It's going to be based on your decisions in most instances. So, be mindful.
One more question about one's purpose and one's financial goals. Meaning you want to be self-sustaining, live a somewhat comfortable life. Your passion, let's say, is making one type of genre of music, but there's no money in that. But that's your purpose.
Then do it. If you really think that's your purpose, if you really feel it, then you should do it. Purpose is not tied to finances. You don't have to exercise your purpose for a living. There's plenty of people that are extremely good musicians, and they have a very different, unrelated day job. There's a lot of CEOs of prominent companies that are also musicians. They play the guitar, they play the piano, they play the drums. We saw that in The Big Short. Right? You don't have to do it professionally to do it. You don't have to get paid for it. Sometimes that's the best way because it remains pure. Oftentimes when you attach a dollar sign to your passion, it's not as fun anymore. And then you start feeling like you have to do it. Because now at one point your passion was something that fueled your excitement. Because it didn't have a burden attached to it. And then when you attach the burden of feeding your family to your passion, passion begins to feel more like a job. So it begins to feel more like something you have to do instead of something that you get to do. And so you don't enjoy it as much anymore. You don't even know if it's still a passion. Because it gets to a point where you can begin to question if you even still like that. Like that thing that was seemingly a passion before. Now it's just a job. Money gets attached to it, politics get attached to it. It's not the same. Sometimes. Oftentimes. You don't have to do your passion for a living. You can keep your passion pure and not attach any burdens to it. And allow it to continue to be the source of enjoyment for you, as opposed to the source of income for you. Because when it's just a source of enjoyment, you can do it however you want to do it, whenever you want to do it, with whomever you want to do it with, for whatever reason you want to do it. It's free flowing because it's just your thing. There's nothing attached to it other than your imagination. That's it. and your time, of course. But once money is attached to it, it becomes something else. It becomes something else in a lot of instances. Even for the people who are successful. It's easy to think about this with people who we perceive not to be successful financially. But even for the people who are successful, they're in the studio now because they have to be. They don't even really like making songs the way that they once did. It's a job now. Touring is a job now. They used to love going on stage and performing. Got to a point where it just doesn't feel the same. Because now they're not thinking about the music as much. They're thinking about how you receive the music. And, are they selling out the venue? And what's going on with the marketing campaign? And what are the record sale projections? And all of these things that they didn't think about before. Before they thought about the baseline. And bars. And now they're thinking about all these other things that don't feel so creative anymore. And for that reason, it may not be fun. Even though they may be successful. There are people running successful businesses. Doesn't mean that they're having a great time doing it. Just because they're successful. Making money means just that. You make money. Doesn't guarantee fulfillment. And it also doesn't necessarily say that you're doing something that's actually helpful to society. Holistically. The only thing that we can say about making money for sure is that you make money. That's it.
Yeah, let's dance. I'm only halfway. I'm just beyond halfway. I'm not gonna talk too much but I think my favorite part was how they beat the Detroit Pistons 2 years back to back. We're just getting beaten up. I understand what they say, like NBA used to be a lot like tougher back in the day.
Yeah.
And then they just worked their asses off physically.
Yeah.
Like skills that was already there.
Mm.
But like physically and mentally, like they can take the beating and not show their pain in order to not give them that momentum of feeling that they got them and just demolished them the third year. Yeah, I think that's my favorite part so far. But yeah, what spoke to you the most about that documentary?
Honestly, I don't remember much of it, and I didn't watch all of it. For me, what spoke most to me from the part that I did watch was Michael Jordan's commitment to winning. Even if he had to make up a story that wasn't true, he would do it to inspire himself to win. Anything you did, the slightest inflammatory gesture, he would use that as fuel to win. And winning is the benefit of that. But chances are you're not going to be the best person in pursuit of that victory if you live that way. And when we listen to the feedback that some of his team members had about him, it's not, a lot of it is not so positive. And he cares about that. Because there was a part of the documentary where he became very emotional when they were talking about that. And he said they may not have liked the way I played the game, but that's how I played the game. And they won. Right? His legacy helped to cement a lot of other people's legacy. But also, their legacy, or their greatness, helped to give him a legacy. Rodman, being a great defensive player that he was, helped to give Jordan his legacy. Pimpin', he was a number 2 guy, but he was an amazing basketball player. And he would have been that with any player that he played with. It's just when you have a duo with certain chemistry, you can't deny it. Doesn't mean that when they stand alone, they're not great. But you can't deny it. And it's easy to forget the number 2. Right? Because we live in a society that only cares about number 1. Who scored the most? Who was the most exciting? They're not looking at the facilitator. The facilitator is the one that's really the person you should be looking out for. Which is why my favorite basketball player was always Jason Kidd, because he was an amazing facilitator. Amazing facilitator. It wasn't about the person who had the fanciest dunk or was the fastest on the court or whatever. Who can set up the play? Who can make it nearly impossible for you to miss? Who's going to facilitate your greatness? That's the best player on the court. And we know that because we even give that to Jordan. We say people got better around him. He made people better around him because he pretty much raised the standard. They see how he plays, they see his commitment. That brings about a certain expectation. And now they had to rise to the occasion. But it was a team effort. The Bulls wouldn't have been the Bulls without Pimpin'. Period. Wouldn't have been the Bulls without Rodman. Period. So, it's just like Robert Horry with the Lakers. You say whatever you want to say about him. But had it not been for him, they would have lost those games. Period. Was he Kobe? No. He wasn't any of the other greats. Some would argue he's not even great. And they have great arguments against that. Or good arguments for that, rather. But him hitting those shots under that pressure is what got them the rings. So, it's important to know your role on any team in life. And it's important to understand the people that you're playing with and the people that you're playing against. It's important to understand the game that you're playing in general. So whatever you're doing, man, just give everything you have to it. If it's really something you love, if it's really something you say is your passion, if it's really something you say is your purpose, give everything you have to it. Because all of the people that we know to be great, they did that, to follow through on their greatness, rather. Because we knew a lot of people who were great. They had moments, but eventually they fell off. They didn't give everything they had to it. These people gave everything they had, and that's the part that gets lost. We talk about great people as if, they just out here living normal lives. They're not. Extraordinary people, they're just like you and I, yes. Yes, indeed. They make one extraordinary decision after another, and pretty much the extraordinary decision that they make is to put the work in. They don't try to cheat the grind. They don't try to cheat it. And they demonstrate their love for it. They're not too cool for it. And that's pretty much consistent with all of them. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Floyd Mayweather, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Robert F. Smith, Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey. At the time, Oprah was working anywhere between 120 and 140 hours in a week. There's only 168 hours. She was working 120 to 140 hours a week for 10 years straight. That's the part that's not talked about a lot. How long Tyler Perry was doing it for free. How many shows he did for free. Some people say, yo, I've been out here doing this for free for years, 10 years. Yeah, but you do one show a year. It sounds good until you dig into it. It's the work. They didn't cheat the grind. They didn't cheat it. Regardless of what they had to tell themselves to do it, they did it. Because they cared that much. And they knew that they had to put the work behind it, like J. Cole said. Why didn't he make it into the NBA? The way he made it in rap. So he thought because he was just dribbling at the local community center, the way that Iverson was, that he was going to make it. Somebody was going to see him. Meanwhile, other people are really putting in that work, putting themselves in front of people. I can't tell you how many people I ran into that thought they were going to move to New York City and become models. Somebody was going to see them walking down the block. Meanwhile, they never developed a portfolio. They never sent it into an agency. They don't know what it's like to take professional pictures. They don't have headshots. It's a lot of that. And commit yourself to whatever it is that you're doing in a real way. And that's what I took from The Last Dance. Just all of these moments where he could have quit. All of these moments where he could have fallen out of alignment with his goal. All of the people that rose to the occasion because they were associated with him. Again, the importance of environment. If I'm jumping from the foul line, what are you doing? LeBron, if I'm training on the off season, what are you doing? If I'm always in shape, Floyd Mayweather, what is the team doing? Environment. Extremely important. Extremely important. So these are the things. Gotta rise to the occasion. And Michael Jordan rose to the occasion. And he created an environment that demanded that his team rise to the occasion. Because they saw what he was doing. It's the same thing with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Magic Johnson saying, y'all came into the stadium and Bird was on top of the bleachers. Like you would have these bleachers, and on top there would be like a circle that people can walk around. And Bird would be running before the game. He'd be jogging up there before the game. Magic Johnson was a people person, out partying, doing whatever. Bird was training. Give that man a ball, it's like he can't miss. Kobe Bryant, playing the game, won the game, still stayed, put up another 500 shots. Football players winning the Super Bowl. Won the Super Bowl. 2 days later, back in the gym. Floyd Mayweather, yo, when's your next fight in 6 months? You look like you're in fighting shape now. I am. You ask me to fight tonight, I can fight tonight. That's the commitment. And that's the part that's not talked about a lot. The fact that the man is running 10 miles every night, 6 months before the fight, 9 months before the fight. He just had a fight, won. 2 nights later, he's out running 10 miles a night. What it means to be great. Like Kobe Bryant was saying, you can say you want to do this, that's great. But do you back out the work that's required to do it? How many push-ups you got to do? How many shots you got to put up? How many laps you got to run around the field? How many suicides you got to do? How many drills you got to do? How many layups? How many times you got to practice that pass, that same pass? That type of commitment is not only for sports. It's not only for talk shows and movies and for entertainment purposes. It's in everything. Bill Gates would sleep under the desk. Get right back up, get right back to work. Jeff Bezos started in the garage with nothing, same thing. Warren Buffett, because at one point he was reading 40 hours a week, reading. Not even working 40 hours a week. It didn't matter how many books he read. It wasn't like, yo, I read a book a week. No, I read 40 hours a week. If that's 10 books, 20 books, 35 books, 40 hours a week reading. Commitment. People look at the things that they've accomplished. They're not paying such close attention to the things that these men are doing, to the things that these great women are doing, and emulating those things that they see these women and these men doing. They're not doing that part. That's what I got from The Last Dance. It was a reminder of what greatness looks like behind the scenes. Doesn't matter, you're sick, your father gets murdered, doesn't matter. You got to show up and play this game and win. So, The Last Dance was a reminder of that. This is what greatness looks like. This is what it means to be great. Not the reward, the prep. Because a lot of what you see on the court, you prepare for that before the game. A lot of that should be prepared for before the fight. Before Mayweather's in there weaving and dodging punches, he prepared for that. You can see when a person didn't because they stumble in those situations. They're not prepared. The greats are prepared. And they can think on their feet. Because they're so accustomed to doing it that even thinking on their feet feels like second nature. Even to be comfortable in that space, you gotta just do it for a while. Most people are not comfortable with somebody swinging at them, trying to punch them in their face. They're not calm in that moment. Some people end up getting punched in their face because they're not calm in that moment. They could have gotten out the way, but they were so frantic, they pretty much ran into the punch. So, The Last Dance is a great source of entertainment that highlights truth.
What did you think of Phil Jackson's role in that team?
Phil Jackson is the coach of all coaches. Phil Jackson is the coach of all coaches. He shows you what it means to be a coach. He shows you the difference between the coach and the mentor. He was another one. Create the environment and then get out the way. And don't feel the need to take credit for anything. And go against the grain. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't support the culture that you're trying to create, if it no longer feels real, if it's too fabricated, if it's getting too far away from what it really is, step in. You did a very good job at that. Not forgetting that it's the players that play the game, not the coach. But also reminding the players that a coach is necessary. You did a really good job at that. He's the coach of all coaches. And not because he's the only great coach, but because of his high profile and him not allowing that to steer him away from his position. So we were able to get a real close look at him. He didn't seem to care about any of it. He cared about coaching his players, coaching his guys. Not about being a star. Solid.